Hi there, everyone. Just a quick introduction in case anyone here is new to the BAA or anyone who's returning who isn't aware of who we are or missed our other presentations. I'll quickly introduce ourselves. My name is Chris. I work for MJH Software Services. I'll be doing the presentation today. And we've also got Michael as well, who'll probably be answering any questions at the end. So over the last few years, MJH Software Services have been developing a piece of software called qWC. In this webinar, I'll briefly describe what qWC is. If you'd like a more detailed description, then I'd recommend that you check out our previous webinar on the Dialog website. This can be found in the resources section of dialog.com, along with many other fine webinars on all things APL. Just a quick word of warning though, our webinar doesn't start until 11 minutes and 14 seconds into the recording, so you might just want to skip on a bit. Later on, I'll talk about, we're actually in version 0.4.4 now, and later on I'll be talking about some of the most exciting recent update for qWC, which was included in this new version, and that's the ability to use the HTMLrenderer with the use of the qLocal function. The qLocal function points qWC to the HTMLrenderer rather than waiting for access to the browser. This means that applications can be developed locally using HTMLrenderer without having to have a web server running. The HTMLrenderer is available on all platforms, allowing the development previously limited to the Windows environment to be possible on Macs, Linux machines, and so forth. With the release of alpha version 0.4.4, we now believe that the basic internal structure of qWC is almost complete. We are moving our focus towards adding the remaining qWC controls and content. We're therefore very keen for you guys to try out this product for yourselves, and later on I will show you how to download, install and set up the latest trial version of qWC from our website. After this, I'll demonstrate the grid object in more detail. The grid object in the hands of a skilled APL developer is a powerful tool, and one we believe to be of high priority. We have therefore been dedicating much of the early development time of qWC to the implementation of the grid. I'll be showing you how to set up a basic grid object before going into some more detail of some of the more advanced features, such as callback functions and events. Before finally, I'll demonstrate these features in action with the classic game Battleships. If we've got time, I'll also run through some of the other working examples that we've included with the qWC trial version. I'll talk about some of the other useful implemented properties, such as the data property. And then finally, at the end, we'll have time to answer any questions you may have. So for a long time now, APL users have been able to create graphical interfaces using the APL command qWC. However, qWC and the GUIs it creates are restricted to the Windows environment. The aim of qWC is to emulate the functionality of qWC, but cross-platform, allowing APL users to create GUIs on Macs, Linux, Raspberry Pis, and onto browsers and so forth. The other goal of the qWC project is to emulate qWC so closely that legacy systems can be updated to the post-Windows environment quickly, simply, with minimal changes to the base code. Changes that every APL user will be able to apply themselves with no additional learning or training beyond their current skill set. So to demonstrate this, if I just quickly share my screen with you guys, hopefully you can see that now. Okay. So to demonstrate this, I'll quickly show a form with qWC. So this is the traditional way, the quad symbol there. And then if we just define simple form, and there you go, the form has popped up. So if I now open up a browser, pop it alongside. I'm just going to do this on the local host, but this would work if you had a full-blown web server going. You see here it's connected. And then it's basically to make this line of code work cross-platform via qWC, we simply change this, should I put the size up a little bit? There we go. I simply change this quad here to a Q. And it should, fingers crossed, there's the form appearing there. I'm very glad that worked, because those of you who have followed my previous presentations at Belfast 18 and the recent webinar will know I'm 0 of 2 for technical demonstrations without making some kind of mistake. So if we make it through this one without some typo or something, I'll be greatly shocked. So please bear with me. Now, if we want to expand this basic form here to include, say, a grid object, we can simply add a child, just like you would. And there we go, you see a grid object appears there. And then if we want to change some of the properties, say add some data to it, that's the values property. Simply. So I'm just going to add 1 to 16. And there you go. You can see it appears on the grid here. So we've implemented a lot of the other properties associated with the grid, such as changing the column and row titles, adding callbacks and all that sort of stuff. But I'll go into that in more detail later in the presentation. It's probably also worth quickly mentioning at this point that you can change the state of the parent object between standard, minimized, maximized, and borderless full screen. Standard, minimized, and full screen you can do this manually. So again, using the set. So qWS is obviously an emulation of qWS, and it's the state property we're looking at this time. So if I change it to 2, for example, that makes it full screen. 1 minimizes it down here. 0 puts it back to normal. The full screen borderless is an enhancement that we've made beyond the current scope of qWC. This state is, you can only set the state manually, and it basically shows the object full screen without the other chrome around it, so without these up here around it. We think this is particularly useful for presenting applications such as web pages. So if I just change this to 3, you see there, all the chrome has disappeared. That's there. We've also implemented these buttons up here, so these now work. So if you want to make it full screen, you can do. You can minimize, it goes down here, and we have several on the ribbon down here, so if you have multiple forms open. And you can close it with the cross there. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, qWC now works with the HTML renderer. Briefly, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, the HTML renderer is a qWC object that displays data like a browser, but locally on your machine, be it a Mac, Linux, or what have you. This allows the developer to work on their application locally before publishing it onto the web. When we use qWC, it also allows Mac and Linux users to use the qWC objects in a non-Windows environment. Now, we're very excited about this recent update, as it will allow you guys to try out qWC without having to set up a web server of your own. Or if you have a web server running, it allows you to switch seamlessly between the two. So let me quickly show you how easy it is to use qWC with the HTML renderer. Firstly, I'll just close this down. Okay, firstly, we run the qLocal function included with the qWC package, using quote as the right-hand argument. We've included a right-hand argument to allow us the scope to add extra options at a later stage of development, such as multiple HTML renderer objects running simultaneously. However, for now, these options are not included in the qWC alpha trial version available to you guys. So if we run this, see there, the same splash page appears and it pops up with the HTML renderer. Let's pop them side by side. And you see here the second connection, the connection's been made. So again, when you're using this, you have to wait for that connection. And then if we try the same lines as before, there's the form. You can see the grid and the values. So you can see how easy it is now to try this out for yourself. And we're hoping that more of you will give it a go. So with that, I'll quickly run through how you can get a copy of the trial version, set it up, and start playing with it. And then, yeah, we've got time. I'll also run through some of the examples that we've included with this. So firstly, I'm going to be very brave And I'm going to delete. This is my administration. Just bear with me. I'm going to delete. Try to. There we go. So I've deleted qWC from my computer now. And then if you go to download it, you simply go to our website, which is www.mjhsoftwareservices.co.uk. And then down at the bottom here, there's a link to download the latest version. So we click on that, wait for it to download. Okay, and it downloads a zip file which basically contains the qWC program and any release notes and also the working examples. So I just extract the files, just bear with me. Okay, so they're here. So all you need to do is make sure that this CMD folder is in C dialog. There we go. Now this is the trial version that we're getting here. And this trial version is time limited, but we will be uploading regularly, we're uploading updated versions with a later cutoff date. So if you get an error message telling you that that it's expired, you probably just need to download the latest version. Okay. So within here, output, then startup, and this should work. Fingers crossed. Again, with the qLocal function, I've opened up an HTMLrenderer. It's connected. And see there it's working. Something else to point out is within the output folder, there is this user folder here. And this contains this workspace here, the qWC examples. Now, this workspace contains all the work examples I'll run through in a moment. But if you want to store any of your own functions and have them appear, then you can save them into a workspace or multiple workspaces within this folder. And when you start up qWC, these will load in. So I'll just quickly show you what I mean. Start up a session and just create a new function. Very crudely. Let's change that just to make sure it can be different. There we are, we have the most basic of functions. And then if we save this so CMD, qWC, output, user, and we'll save this as Chris. Okay. And then if I go back to the output folder and open up startup, so at the top here, it's loaded both the qWC examples and also the new workspace Chris there. And if we start one of these up, hopefully, oh wait, no, did I call it? Yeah, I did. Oh, I didn't wait for it to connect. My apologies. Let's try that again. See, I told you we wouldn't make it through. Okay. Bit of patience this time. Okay, there we go. And there we see it's loaded up the form. Let's just put these alongside each other. Okay. Obviously the base code has been locked on this version for obvious reasons, but the examples I'm about to run through, they are all open. So if you do want to have a go at this yourself and you want to look at the examples, then you'll be able to access all the code that I'm about to show you, play around with it to your heart's desires. And I'll just run through a few of these examples now, just quickly, to show you what sort of thing is possible. So this is example 1. Now, I'll only talk about this briefly, as we covered this in more depth back in the November webinar. But basically, it shows a form here where you can change the background color by clicking on the buttons. So it's either, okay. If we have a quick look at the code, you can see here that it's all very much as you'd expect. There's the form, there are the buttons, there are the menu bars. If you replaced all these queues with a quad, then qWC would load up just as you expect and produce exactly the same thing. And if we look at the callback function, again, nothing there, nothing complicated there. It's all just, again, using qWS to set the background color rather than qWS. Okay. EX2. This is basically, again, just shows a simple drop-down box working and then a button displaying the choice via a label. So me or my 2 sisters, whichever one choose. And it's displayed on a label down here. Again, this is not particularly complicated stuff, but it's just showing you what is possible. And if we look at the code again, and nothing complicated here, nothing, nothing radical. Just again changing the quad to a queue, and again the callback function. You may notice that I define quadml and quadIO as 1 at the start of all my code. I do this out of habit now, whether I actually need to or not. This is because I, like most normal, sensible people, work in quadml 1. Michael, maverick that he is, works in quadml 3. So to avoid any confusion, from the very beginning, I've always just put it at the start of my code. So if you see that there, that's a sure sign that I've coded it, that along with the lack of comments and general sloppy APL. But it's worth mentioning that the final product will be quadml and quadIO neutral. So you can use whatever particular varieties floats your boat. And you won't need to do that sort of localization in the final product. Example 3, again, it's just a very simple example with radio buttons, a drop-down box, and an edit box. Just showing you the different inputs that are possible, and then a button confirming at the bottom, showing what you've chosen. So again, it's just showing the different sorts of buttons that could be used. And again, the code, very, very similar to what you'd expect. I've organized them this time into groups. So you can see the group control for the first time there. Again, all fairly basic stuff. And example 4. This one's one Michael's done, as you can tell, because it doesn't at the top there. Example 4 was written by Michael, and I actually adapted it from his own test function that he used when implementing the states and the close event of the form object. So on this one, when that box isn't ticked, then the form doesn't close. But as soon as you tick this box, the form will close. So it just shows you that you can actually access the close functions and customize them as you want, and the other functions like the minimize and maximize if you'd like to. Example 5, again, very quickly because I've talked about this one before. This is just showing an edit box and showing off the password function. So you see here, it shows the password. It's back. And if we look at the code, again, back to mine, as you can tell. And you can see it's all what you expect. There's the password, placing the inputted characters with a star. So I'll skip over that one fairly quickly and say, if you want more information, either contact us or check out our previous videos. Example 6. Now, this is an interesting one, at least to me anyway, as it demonstrates the use of the data property to store data instead of assigning it to a global variable. Now, I believe every object has a data property which can store one APL array of data. In addition to being neater than assigning data to global variables, this also has the advantage of keeping data unique to each instance of the application. So for example, it can be used to store data applicable to each individual instance, like the user setting configuration or something like that. So here you can see, if I go into the code, there's a data property here, I've just assigned it initial value of 0. And then if we look at the callback just either increases by 1 or sets it back to 0, depending on which button is pushed. So to show you that in action, you see here, 1, 2, 3, back to 0. And if we go back to the code, that's interesting form. Okay. And then if we look at F, see there, it matches what's on there. This one's also a good example of qWS and qWG, or set and get, being used within the callback itself. So as we add more controls, we will add further videos and further working examples. And later on, I'll run through some of the controls and objects we'll be adding in the short term. But if there are any you would like to see included sooner rather than later, please let us know, and we'll talk about moving them up the priority list. Okay, and now I'll talk a little bit more about the grid. As I said earlier, I showed you a very basic grid, but qWC allows you far more control. So if I just load up a demo file for this. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's click. There we go. Okay, so first of all, I'm setting the coordinates to pixel for this one. Now it's like with qWC, the default is to work with proportion, but I prefer to use pixel. qWC does support both proportion and pixel, and we'll be looking at some other options later on if they're needed. Again, if you need them particularly for mobile phone applications, I believe it's quite useful. But just let us know if you'd like them moved up the order. So first of all, I'll create a form. So again, you can see here using the rather standard hello world as a caption. The other thing I should probably point out is that, like qWC, you don't actually need to include the keywords if they follow the order, the correct order for the properties. So for example, the first one is type, then the second one will be caption. Because this immediately follows on, you don't actually need to define that you're defining the caption. It just works. The next one would then be position, but since I want it to go to the default position in the middle of the screen, I have left it blank. And then to make sure it knows that the next one is size, you then have to define the keyword. So that works exactly the same as you would with qWC. Also, you can put any form of capitalization within this, within the size. You could have capital Z in the middle if you particularly wanted to. Again, in line with qWC. Hopefully making it easier for legacy systems to use this. Okay. Then we'll create a grid. So here the grid's appeared. You may notice this red box in the top left-hand corner. That's not like qWC. This was something we did and that we've left in from a few demonstrations ago. It basically shows we can access this top corner box, which I don't believe qWC can. So when we implement things like picture, you'll be able to put a picture up there, or maybe a date or a calendar. Just shows you that we can access all areas of the grid. Okay, talking of, we can change the size of the grid. You see there it shrinks. There it gets bigger. Put it back again. We can change the column titles. So if you see here, we can change these column titles to these. There we go. Change the row titles. Get rid of the column titles and the row titles, and we can also change the size of them as well. We can change the size of the cells themselves. And we can use qWG to get the values currently within the grid and display them back in the session. You can also change the values. So here we've changed them from numerical to non-numerical. You may also notice that the grid changes size automatically to match the size of the data it can change to. So here it's gone to a 2 by 2. And again, we can get it out. You can see here it's displayed. Now if we put it back to 3 by 3, and you may notice that the lines here have disappeared. This is something we're currently working on. It's basically the implementation of the property grid fqol, which will allow us to change the colors of the grids, of the lines between the grids. So at the moment, if you make it slightly larger, they do disappear. But we will be implementing that in a later release. So you'll be able to, so they'll remain there, or you can change the colors of them. And again, it shows the values. And change it back to that. We can also change the background color of the grid itself, so the area not used by the grid. And it's worth pointing out here as well that another enhancement we've made over qWC is you can actually just use the word for the color rather than having to do the 255, 2550 or whatever it is, just because we think it's a little bit easier to use. Change the background of the cells themselves, so there I've made them blue. And you can also use cell types by setting cell types here to a grid that matches with different ones. You can use the cell types, and then if you enter 2 colors, there we go. We can edit the cells using cell types and change it. And then fqol changes the color of the data itself. Okay, so we've actually also included some specific grid-specific examples along with this as well, like I showed you earlier. These are EXG1 to EXG3. I might quickly, if you'll, run through these now. So this is the first one. Again, it's quite simple. It just shows the grid like before, but we can actually change the data as a result of a callback function, either from the drop-down menus, or from the drop-down box, or from the menus. Yeah. So if we have a quick look at the code, again, all very similar to what you'd see normally. I've defined pixels at the top. Instead of a quad, I'm using Q. Apart from that, there's the form. There are the menu bar, menu items. There's the combo box, and so forth. And callbacks. I've put the data in as a local variable. Obviously, you could read that from external source. This is just for an example version. But it's all very much as you would expect. Okay. Now, example 2. Example 2 is currently causing us a few issues. We're currently working on implementing the show input property. And this in its current form is slowing down the grid too much. So I don't recommend, causing a few things to go wrong with this, the edit boxes. So I don't recommend that you use this example for yourself, but I can quickly show you it. We've got the date picker here, and you can change the date, and it does change it. And also, you see it's a little bit slow responding. And you can also see here the checkbox changes. So we can, with the next release, we hope that all these input methods will be fully functional within the grid object and will be back up to their original speed. We can also change the focus to a different cell using qNQ, which is the emulation of qOD-NQ. You see our cunning naming system. So if you type in here, down here, qNQ, then the object, which I believe is f.g, cell move, and then where we want it to go. See there, it's moved cell 1-1. Change this to 3-3. Moves down there to cell 3-3. We can also interrogate it to find out what the current cell is by using the curcell property. So again, using qWG for get curcell, which is there. We're back to 3-3. And then, oh yes, and then we've got the third example. This one, again, is an example. It shows you how you can change cell types with a callback function to alter the appearance of cells. In this case, I'm using bcol. So if I click on here and select a pattern, it changes. You see there, I'm using cell type. So if we have a quick look into the code again, all standard stuff here, got the buttons and their groups. And if we look at the callbacks, this first one, for the first group, will change what colors are selected. And the second one will change, it just changes the cell types. So you see all fairly simple stuff that you can use. I mean, obviously, again, this is just creates pretty patterns. It's not that useful, but you can use these same techniques to approach to validate and highlight specific data trends or outliers, depending on how clever your callbacks are. And so finally, I've created a application that lets you play battleships. So you select a new game. Again, this is slower than in previous versions, and that's because currently we're sending all the grid data each time, and we're also refreshing the grid far too often. This should be fixed in the next release. We believe we have the solution now. I've just banned Michael from playing with it until after this webinar in case he breaks everything again. So yeah, this hopefully will be a lot quicker. So again, if you see, we click here, and you see it's far too slow. In previous versions, this was instantaneous, so we hope we will get back to that with the next release. Just click on here. Now, to save me waiting until I randomly find the hit, I shall just show you. We can cheat because the location of the ships is saved within the data property of the form itself. So there we go. And if we look at 4.6. Oh, one we're doing.
One more to the left. One more to the left. You can't count.
Oh, right. Oh, it's going down, that's why. I thought I'd... yeah, I can't count. As I said, it's always going to happen. You see there, it's registering the hit, and it's changing the cell types, and therefore the background color, and recording the hits down here. So, yeah, and again, if you want to have a quick look at the code, all these are available and are open, so people will be able to see this code for themselves. Please try not to judge me too much on my terrible APL. These are meant just examples. So yeah, so as I mentioned previously, the immediate future plan is to develop the grid further, to get back to the speed and performance we had before, and improve the implementation of the new features we've added. We'll also be updating the base code so that it is Quad IO and Quad ML neutral. We'll also be looking at implementing picture, tree view, list view, and font objects over the next few releases. If there are any other controls that you would like us to implement as a priority, please let us know. For some examples of what is possible, you can go to the Syncfusion website. I'll just quickly show you this now. If you go to help.syncfusion.com, and then choose it's the Web Essential JavaScript 1, because we're using the JavaScript 1 objects at the moment. We hope to move to 2 quite soon. But for now, and then click on Demos, and this will give you an idea of some of the things that we can implement. So here is the tree view. This is very nice. If we go back, maybe quickly show you some of the charts. So again, these are all things that we could put in. At the moment, it's a matter of us prioritizing what controls we do first. And those things I mentioned earlier are ones we've had mentioned to us. But if you would like to see some of these implemented sooner, please let us know, because these are all possible. In the longer term, we want to make further improvements to the speed, as I said, by moving to some next generation controls. We also want to implement shared GUI properties across several users and persisting GUI properties. So in layman's terms, the persisting GUI properties will allow users to save the state of some or all of their GUI when they leave. For example, an Amazon-style shopping basket or persistent user settings. Implementing shared GUI properties will allow collaborative work by users and add a true multi-user experience. For example, allowing you to play card games with your friends on the same application. We have implemented this kind of shared data already in our sister project Firebrand, and implementing this into qWC will likely be one of my main focus areas over the next few months. So I'd just like to thank you all for listening. Thank you to the BAA as well for letting us speak. If you have any questions, speak up now and Michael will answer them, or you can email us at your convenience.